Figure it out.
Hello, this is Adam Koralik from Figured Out Productions. The following video is a video of some kind, and I hope you enjoy it.
Hey guys, it's Adam here, and today we're going to be talking about Shenmue 3, as if I've never talked about it before, but specifically, like, my review of it. I hesitate to use that word because, as I'm sure a lot of you guys have noticed, I've been making YouTube videos for 10 years. I've never done a game review. I'll talk about stuff, sometimes it will show specific gameplay of something, you know, but I've never sat down and been like, here are my complete thoughts on a video game. It's not really my style. Obviously, Shenmue is a very special case because anybody who knows anything about me, particularly, you know, through YouTube and all that, knows that I'm a big fan of this series. It's given me pretty cool opportunities and access to a lot of things in ways that I never expected. It's, you know, weird to be to be so associated with a game that, other than being a Kickstarter backer and just a super fan, I really had nothing to do with. But it's awesome, and so yeah, I appreciate that so many of you want to know, was it worth it? You know, was the game what you wanted? Are you happy? And I will say this, like, the short answer is yes. There's obviously flaws with the game. And I'm very open to that reality. Despite how much of a fan I am, that doesn't make me delusional. I'm perfect, 10 out of 10, there's nothing wrong, you did it exactly the way it needs to be done. I'm not delusional. That's not what I believe. There are flaws. And we'll talk about that, but on the whole, I am happy with the product we got. So first, to talk about, in case you are new here, thank you. Please like, comment, subscribe. I have to be that YouTuber douche who has to say that. That's the rules now. But yeah, if you could do that, that would actually be nice. But yeah, we'll talk about that. Obviously, what you see in front of you is some Shenmue stuff. I am a fan of the series. I've been pushing for it, the return of Shenmue, since I started making YouTube videos 10 years ago. Since 2001, when Shenmue 2 originally came out on the Dreamcast, I've wanted a sequel. And I wanted it much more intensely from like 2003 onward. It was like, where is Shenmue 3? Pushing for it in any way available to me. And over time, you know, I acquired a lot of cool stuff, and pushed for it in the way I could through the small outlet that I really have through YouTube. And eventually, like I said, it opened certain doors. I got to work with Sega very heavily on the re-release right here. This is the Japanese special edition of the re-release. This one's unique to me because I got this signed. I personally met up with some of these people who are now friends. Voice actors like Lisa Wilkerson, who voiced Yuan, Shuying, and Joy in Shenmue 2. She signed this for me. She is a friend of mine. I actually hang out with her. Corey Marshall, also the voice of Ryo originally for 1, 2, and 3. Now, one of my best friends, actually. I text him all the time. We hang out. You know, he's asked me, like, come out to LA and just hang out. It doesn't have to be about Shenmue. And I'm like, I agree completely. And then people like Eric Kelso, who voiced Guizong and Ren and Fukusan originally. Met up with him for dinner in Japan and got him to sign this. Masayo Matsukaze, the Japanese voice actor of Ryo. I do not speak Japanese. He does not speak English. Yet we were able to connect and be able to have him not only sign this, but he signed other things that I was able to do for charities and giveaways just through the love of Shenmue. And that guy is a big deal in Japan. I mean, that dude is a former Power Ranger. That dude was in a Godzilla movie. He's a constant voiceover actor for multitudes of animes. But Shenmue, he loves to talk about that because it never really comes up there in Japan, which we'll get back to. And then, of course, the man himself, Yu Suzuki, who I've met so many times now. The dude knows my name. You know how flattering that is? It's awesome. Point is, I'm obviously a big Shenmue fan, so I got that on a personal level. I've been a big fan of Shenmue 1 and 2, and I was able to be very heavily involved with the re-release through Sega's involvement. They themselves wanted me involved for that, which is flattering as hell. When it came to Shenmue 3, now, obviously that was a whole different team and a whole series of different circumstances, but I did my best to help push this game into existence in any way I could, and knowing it was going to exist, I wanted to raise as much awareness as some lowly YouTuber possibly could, doing anything. So including this, like, this was a contest for these things I was doing. This is some fans, some just fans. These were given to me by Deep Silver at Japan Expo in Paris, and I went around the world and got these signed by various people involved in Shenmue 3. A multitude of the English voice cast. Masayo Matsukaze, once again. Cedric Biscay, the producer of the game, the original, like, Shibuya Productions, the first company to have faith in Shenmue 3 and get behind it. And of course, the man himself, Yu Suzuki, once again signed these. giving those away to raise awareness. I, as a fan myself, have acquired a whole bunch of different versions of the game. We have the European Collector's Edition of the game. We have the American Collector's Edition of the game. This one including that cool Dreamcast case. We have just a standard American copy that I had multiple versions of that. The GameStop edition with the little coin. The Best Buy edition with the steelbook. The Amazon one that just had some DLC. Like, whatever, small things. I've got this Japanese copy of the game. This is a side note. You can win this. I'm giving this away. A company called Go Collect actually paid for this. I bought it myself in Yokosuka, as in where the first game takes place. Myself. I acquired this there. This came from Yokosuka, down the street, as close to as possible for the first game, where the first game takes place. Go Collect ultimately paid for it, and if you want to win this, it's simple. There's an option. There's a Twitter link below. Follow me. Follow Go Collect, retweet that tweet, you're entered to win a Japanese copy of the game. This is region free, it plays back in English as well. You can win this cool edition. And the Japanese edition is not going to be very common. Again, we'll get back to that, but I hope you guys will go ahead and enter that. And also, I have this, a promo copy of Shenmue 3. This is really just given out to reviewers in Europe, but I managed to get one. And there's more editions, like the French Pix and Love edition and all that stuff that I'm working on getting as well. Point is, I'm obviously a Shenmue fan. That's really what all of that comes down to. And I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, although I could because I'm very double-jointed. But that wasn't the point of that. The whole fan base deserves massive credit for Shenmue 3. This game, by all rights, should not exist. But it does. And it does solely because of the willpower of a fan base that everyone said was delusional. Kotaku famously referred to us as being crazy to think that this was ever going to happen. Now, I will admit there were plenty of times where I didn't believe it would, but I would fight for it anyway. It's like losing a war, knowing you're going to lose, but you go down to the last man. When it actually came into existence, it was stunning to me. Stunning for so many people. It was seeing a friend who was long gone punch their way out of a grave and will themselves into existence and back into your life. It was super incredible to me and to a whole host of other people. Now, so we all need to take a moment and really just appreciate the effort, the willpower it took to make such an unlikely thing actually occur. So now, once the game exists, what do we think of it? Now, I've seen several reviews out there, and a lot of them, I gotta be honest, I actually very much agree with. There are legitimate criticisms of this game from an actual gameplay standpoint, and I want to talk about those. On the whole, though, as I said before, I did enjoy this game. This was unapologetically Shenmue. Ever since I first played the demo back at E3, that's exactly the same position I had, which was this game is Shenmue. If you like Shenmue, this is the next Shenmue. It plays exactly the same way with a couple of quirks. Some of those quirks, good and bad, we can go into that. But this is not a game for newcomers, which I hate to say because it's not a very marketable position, but it is the truth. Without having played the first two Shenmues, this is a weird place to start, and I wouldn't recommend doing it. But I would recommend getting Shenmue 1 and 2, because if you have that, plus this, I mean, you can get that whole bundle really cheap these days, which is nice. Because it didn't used to be like that. But let's get past all that. Let's pretend, all right, I'm a fan, whatever. What the hell do you actually think of this game? So I think that the most glaring issue when it comes to the gameplay was they came up with they understood they had a limited budget, so they couldn't make this massive game the same way they had the first two. Now, when I say that, I mean in the sense of like how much would really be accomplished versus how many basically areas there are. Because the first game had the advantage or disadvantage of being broken up by loading screens, because the Dreamcast had to load stuff. So when you have to load things, they could just completely change the area that you were in. Now, they didn't do that in this game. Therefore, Bailu Village is one consistent area. Now, when you're wandering around, you actually see how big that area is. But I think as a Shenmue fan, you're sitting there thinking, the original game had Yamanose, it had his house, it had Sakuragaoka, it had Dobuita, it had the harbor. It just feels bigger, even though that's really basically 5 sections and they're broken up into loading screens. This one has probably as many sections, it's just you don't really notice it because, they're not broken up by loading screens. Where you do notice it is the music changes. And that actually constantly threw me off. It's like you're wandering around the same area, because from when you're looking at stuff, it just looks like one consistent town. But the music changes depending on where you are, because it's meant to give a different vibe of that particular section, which was just like the originals, except, like I said, no loading screen. So it just kind of changes and it feels strange. That was just my vibe of it. And I think that maybe that's why people kind of get that impression. And the same thing would go for Niaowu, which was the second big area. I'm also assuming you guys have played it. It feels the same way, where it's a giant area, but broken up, again, by basically music, as opposed to loading screens to give the sense of it. So in the end, it almost comes off like you really just have two areas, when really you have a lot of areas. It's just that you don't notice as much. That's kind of the way that came off to me. But it was jarring because of the music. I'll definitely say that. Now, gameplay-wise, much like the original, what I did with Shenmue 3 is I was grinding. See, I don't like to proceed too far into the game without, really being capable of doing the fights and all that stuff. So in Shenmue 1 is weird at this, but there is actually a genius to it if you've played it before and you kind of know to do this. The training system in Shenmue 1, both you train in the middle of the night by sleeping and pre-practicing a move, but also when you go over to like the parking lot and you do attacks and just practice, you're upgrading your skill set. Most people don't do that because Shenmue 1 has a lot of downtime in it, which was a flaw from a gameplay mechanic standpoint, but the one kind of genius aspect of it is without them telling you, they expect you to figure it out, is, hey, that's when you're supposed to be training. So what you do during those downtimes is you go and train. And so that's why Shenmue 2 doesn't really have a training system, because the idea was that you do all that in Shenmue 1, that would carry over to Shenmue 2, and whatever skill set you had in the first one, you get in the second one, slightly improved because the game has to continue, and that's going to be a theme, which we'll get back to. Now, obviously, because the series didn't continue originally that way, they had to scrap that entirely and just give you a whole new training system, one that was more modernized. But because I'm used to that grinding system with Shenmue 1, I wanted to facilitate that for Shenmue 3. That's how I wanted to approach it. And that works. So the game has kind of this system where you have to max out your kung fu, you have to max out your fighting, you have to max out your endurance. And there's different little things to do that. Endurance is doing things like the horse stance until you've maxed out all the little green cells, so your health bar, if you want to call it that, is at full power. Your kung fu is just kind of your overall strength and understanding and all that stuff. And that's maxed out by acquiring fighting moves and, also maxing out your stamina and your fighting skills specifically. And then, of course, the fighting skills is the fighting skills. It's, how strong he basically is. So you do that by practicing certain things, including things like acquiring move scrolls. I actually liked this because originally when you acquired a move scroll in the first two games, he basically would just look at the move scroll and said, oh, cool, I mastered it. And you never really had to practice it or do anything with it. It's just he was a master of it now. You could, but you didn't have to. In this, they make you practice each move enough that you actually know how to do it, which is pretty cool. And that maxes out those skill sets. And the way you acquire a lot of these move scrolls, you can do it through certain story missions will have it, but also basically what I keep referring to as the in-game economy, which is you need money to buy certain things, like capsule toys or items, trading goods. Or you need to buy tokens, which are basically like gambling currency. And one way or another, the idea is to get the right amount of items or gambling tokens, etc., and trade them in the right sequence to earn a move scroll. And then once you have the move scroll, you can take it over to a sparring place, and you spar until you master that move. And if you're playing it that way, the game will take forever, but in a kind of rewarding way, because you get stronger and all that stuff. The story will kind of suffer for it because you'll just be kind of grinding consistently. But that's different. It's just how you go about playing it. That's how I chose to play it. But there is a point where once you've maxed out all those things, once you've maxed out your those three elements I was just talking about, you crash the in-game economy. So once you've done that, there is no motive to get scrolls anymore because you cannot max anything out anymore. You cannot advance. So if you don't need to get scrolls, then you don't need to get items. You don't need to get money. You don't need to do any of that. The only time you need to do that is if you want health-based stuff, which would be food. So let's talk about that for a second, the food aspect of it. The original 2 games did have food items in them, but they were completely superfluous for the most part. Most food-based items you couldn't do anything with. Some you could give to like the cat in Shenmue 1. But that's kind of about it. Ryo didn't really eat anything. He makes a couple references to eating, which I almost wonder if that was why it was done this way, because we used to joke about it. Like, in Shenmue 1, the only time he ever eats is when Tom gives him a hot dog, and you don't see him, he says he'll eat it. And then, like, Shenmue 2, there's a couple scenes where he says, like, oh, okay, we'll eat. He eats at, like, Shenhua's house, but you don't see it. And then we just know he hates carrots. You know what I mean? Which, that should have been a joke somewhere in this game. They should have had carrots that he could eat and just, blah, didn't like it. But... yeah, as far as I recall, anyway, that wasn't a part of this game. But so this game, they decided to make the food have some sort of purpose. So that's the point of the endurance system, is that your health constantly is in a state of decrease. I get why that was done. It, like I said, gives the economy of a game more of a purpose, and it gives the player something additional to have to do or worry about, which I'm actually not opposed to. Where I think they messed up on that is the rate in which the energy decreases is constant. It's like watching a clock secondhand, just constantly ticking. It doesn't even hang. It's not like it went down 1, next. It doesn't do that. It's just like boom, 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 boom. And I'm just like, okay, you need a bug patch there. It's not that that's a flaw with the coding. That's like a flaw of logic. They got to decrease that by at least 50%. It just goes down way too quickly, to the point of it being annoying. So everyone seems to keep doing the same thing to respond to this, which is, okay, you need to buy food. And they to their credit, they were creative about it. They put tons of different types of food in the game. But everyone keeps getting the same items. Everyone gets bananas, and they get the garlic cloves. And some people will get the steamed buns. That's actually the best one. But the reason they do that is because of how much, how much power you really get out of that. Because you can eat like the apples and the bananas, but they are like Thanos snap quick level depreciation. Like you'll eat the banana you'll eat like it's like a bunch of bananas is good, but an individual banana not so much. But you eat like an apple, and like the amount of energy you get from that, you lose like a split second later. It's like totally pointless. So I think that needs some sort of update. I think that was a flaw. When it comes to the fighting system, I have to say, as a longtime Shenmue fan, it did throw me off initially, and that's the same thing I said back when I played the demo at E3. I thought that it was weirder, but I got very used to it. I actually ended up liking it quite a bit. I do wish the dodging was still there. You can still kind of do that with like the right thumbstick, or is it the left thumbstick? Either way, when you're playing it, you can still do that. It's just different than pressing like triangle or whatever. Once I got used to it, I liked it more, and I actually found that it was better for the fight combinations, which I really enjoyed, because as much as I love the original games, I was never really good at the fighting. I was just kind of like button mashing until I won, which, to be fair, I'm still kind of doing. But at least in this one, I can actually pull off some of the cool moves because they force you to learn them. But they do it kind of through QTE, which is totally impossible unless you've memorized the moves, and that's the next criticism I have. QTEs in this game, while they've been drastically brought down from the intensity that they felt in the first 2 games, because they more or less invented the QTE, at least the modern day version. The QTE has been so destroyed by pop culture that hates the concept now. I think it's all because of pay F for respect from the Call of Duty thing. I think that's where that originates. It's just so much of like, people don't want that, so they had to be a little bit different about it, so they don't do them very frequently. But when they do them, they're too quick, to the point of it being like impossible. And I realize they're supposed to be quick, it's in the name, but it's like in any setting, it's like a universal complaint. Everybody's like, I can't do those. So the only way you can do them, and they seem to be aware of this, is if you fail one, you just repeat the sequence. So then it just becomes a game of memorization. So you're like, okay, now I know if I press left, and then I have to press triangle, then I have to press down, or whatever. You just memorize the order. That's the only way to get through it, unless you're really, really good. So I think the solution for that, again, would be a bug patch where they take the speed of that down, like, I don't even know, like 20, 30%. It doesn't have to be much, just enough for it to be possible. Because without knowing in advance, like, you will screw it up. So I found that to be a flaw. Now, that's minor stuff. Now, on the game as a whole, I think the obvious one people want to talk about is the story. The story, you have to understand, if you're not familiar, Shenmue's story was meant to be massive. It was originally meant, at one time it was supposed to be one game that would encompass what I believe they were referring to at the time as 15 chapters. I think it was 15 chapters. And as they're in production of this, it's going so crazy and so chaotic that Sega eventually forced the first game out, which is literally just chapter 1. Chapter 1 of like a 15-chapter saga. That's insane. And it wasn't supposed to be 15 games, it was supposed to be 7 games. But it was like 15 chapters of story. No, sorry, 11 chapters of story. 11 chapters of story and 7 games was the original plan. Oh, well, okay. Original plan was Virtua Fighter RPG, or the Old Man and the Peach Tree, then Virtua Fighter RPG, then Shenmue, the one big game, and then Shenmue, the 7 games. Okay, that's that plan. So it's like plan 4. Whatever. It was supposed to be that. Now that story and all that has been condensed massively, even during the original Dreamcast production. So Shenmue 1 is chapter 1. They skipped chapter 2 entirely. They just cut it out, straight out. The whole thing was supposed to be Chai, and he's following you on the boat that you ride from Shenmue 1 in Japan to Shenmue 2 in Hong Kong. There's like a whole story on the boat. They cut all of that. So Shenmue 2 is chapters 3, 4, and the first half of 5. And to Yu Suzuki's credit, he was smart enough to put the first half of 5 in there. The game was supposed to end at Kowloon, at the top of the big Yellowhead building, the big Ox building. It was supposed to end there. But a whole bunch of the initial Shenmue 3 was done, and they wanted to include it just in case nothing ever happened. So that's essentially Disc 4, where you're walking with Shenhua and all that stuff, and you actually find out what Shenmue means and all that. So Shenmue 3, to continue that story, is actually just the second half of Chapter 5, and then like the first half of Chapter 6. Which is why, and we're going into, I mean, if we haven't covered it already, we're going into spoilers territory here. That's why Shenmue 3 ends at a very weird spot. It feels, I don't want to say unsatisfactory, it just feels kind of like, huh, okay. And? Which is kind of the way Shenmue 1 ended. Like, it ended and you went, huh, okay. Next. Not with Shenmue 2's ending, which was like, I need more. It's a different type of ending, and I think it really has to do with where it takes place in the storyline. So obviously I want Shenmue 4, and we'll talk about that in a bit. But yeah, so I think that Shenmue 3 gave me a nice conclusion to Chapter 5. It got me through Bailu Village. I understood now a lot of why that was all set up and where everything was going with that and what that plot line was. It then set up the chapter, it set up, Niao Sun and all that stuff. Granted, it did it a little haphazardly, because at the end of the game there, it feels a little like a lot's happening really quick, and you're kind of like, huh, what? And then you see Lan Di, and then it's you lose to him because you have to, and then the game kind of ends. So it's meant to give you this, like, I think, feeling of like, okay, where's the next one? So like, instead of Shenmue 2 ending with like, hey, we got to escape the cave, this ended more with like, I guess we have to get over the wall, or whatever you want to call that. Is that the next one? Hashtag get over the wall. But I feel like that was what they were going for. And I'm not sure that ending was powerful enough for that. But I also believe confidently that I know firsthand that Yu Suzuki is very much ready to do Shenmue 4. He wants to do it. And this isn't even like, I do know that firsthand, like personally, having met him, but I can also tell you, like, anybody can know that. The end of the game also tells you that. Like, in the credit sequence is a letter from Yu Suzuki saying, like, I want to do Shenmue 4, let's make it happen. So again, vote with your wallets, buy Shenmue 3. But that said, the story did not advance as much as I would have hoped for the years we were waiting for it. You got some nice conclusion to Shenmue 2, and you got a little bit of setup, but in the end, that's kind of all you really got, with some extra details here and there. There were some inconsistencies, like Ryo relearned some stuff he already had been told in Shenmue 1 or 2, mostly 2, which was a little strange. Stuff like that, which I thought was a little odd. And I will say this, there has been one criticism that once I read it, I was like, that is really true. Basically, how weird it is that some of the characters that are there helping you at the end of Shenmue 3 would even bother to be there. Specifically, there's the guy with like the weird hair, who's like a chubby like martial arts expert, and who I've been joking is, oh, that's the NPC they based on me, which is not true at all, but it's funny to think about. And then there's that chick with the broom. The two of them join you in your final battle, along with Ren, who we knew already, and then that other like Grandmaster with the hat. in an effort to save Shenhua. So let's talk character development. Ryo's solid. He's your protagonist. We know him very well. It's all good. Shenhua, even though she's not part of that fight, she's the only other character in this game I feel gets sufficient character development. She's becomes very interesting. And I will say this, keep an eye on her. She is more fascinating in this game than you think. And just, this is all I'll say. Watch how characters interact with her. And I'm going to leave that sort of story speculation to people like James Reiner. But Shenhua is weird. Really weird. Like, much weirder than the games have let on so far. And then when you kind of, you know, I don't know how else to put this other than to say, like, once you kind of know that, and you go back and replay the others, but we'll leave it at that.
Who would have thought you hooked up with a girl?
Leo, who is he?
Oh, this is Ren.
So, you've already told her stories about me, huh? But that doesn't mean you can leave me in the dark. Where did you meet a girl like this? Hmm?
What's the matter, Ren?
Never mind. It's none of my business. I'll see you around.
The Grandmaster dude with the hat, while I feel he was underdeveloped, he was at least logical in that situation because he was the dude boating you across and he was also, you know, a Grandmaster and all that. The other two characters, and Ren. Ren himself has very little development in this game. He doesn't really need it because if you're a fan, you already know him from Shenmue 2. You got that. He does a little bit more in this, but, you know, that's fine. It's the other two that are weird because basically what happens is all of you, other than Shenhua, go over to this area to rescue Shenhua. And I can buy Ren going with you because he's in the shit with you. I can buy the Grandmaster because he's already there. But the other two, I just don't get why they would be there. Because in the previous, like, the way their characters are developed, you have a couple of scenes with the dude with the hair, and then you have, like, one scene with the girl with the broom. To me, they come off like characters that you would have met in Shenmue 1 and 2 that at best you would have said, like, thank you for helping me in my journey, I'm leaving town, goodbye. They would not be involved in that big sequence. It's not like, say, the end of Shenmue 2, where every character... If you think about the end of, not quite the end at the top of the Big Ox building, the Yellowhead building, you're up there with Ren, Wong, Joy, and these characters who in one way or another have become your true friends. I mean, let's think about it. Ryo's father's dying words were, keep friends, those you love, close to you. That's like a theme of the series is, you know, friends are an important thing and keep them in your life, you know, earn that. And he does. Because, I mean, if you look at the characters at the end of Shenmue 2, like I said, Ren was a guy who literally tried to kill you. He tries to kill you in Shenmue 2. By the end of it, he's like your best friend. There's even a joke about that.
That should just about do it. The rest is up to you.
How are we even friends?
Wong is when you first met him, the dude stole everything you had. He's still one of your best friends now. Even though he's this kid, you make him as a friend. Now, Joy was always kind of cool to you, but Ryo doesn't really get along too well with women for some reason. But either way, a friend. Even if it's like a friend with some sort of conflict in there, still a friend. But those two characters at the end of Shenmue 3 felt very unearned. And I feel like they must be important to the beginning of Shenmue 4. Otherwise, I don't really see why they're there. Or that they have more development in upcoming DLC or something like that, because they felt very just tacked on, which didn't feel very Shenmue to me, which was very strange, but it's whatever. That's all I can think of, because without knowing what this DLC might consist of or what Shenmue 4 might consist of, it feels to me like they kind of could have cut them out, because in that whole sequence at the end, you're really just hanging with Ren the whole time. And then you, of course, see Shenhua and all that. They didn't need to be there. The only time you see them is in cutscene footage, which, as cool as it was to watch, them work together and kick the crap out of these guys, it didn't actually affect you as a player. So I'm not really sure that that was necessary. I think that they were going for that same type of vibe at the end of Shenmue 2, and they just kind of missed the mark a bit. I am, however, going to contradict myself a bit here. I remember what I said about Shenhua being weird. Let me just play this clip for you.
Where are you headed?
To Liu Jiao Shrine on Sonari Road.
Got it.
I'm going to talk to the shrine maiden you met with.
Ah, Shirling?
Is that her name? Yes, her.
I'm kind of thinking that Shenhua's been doing some, Emperor Palpatine style manipulation here. Now, let's put all this together, and then you guys let me know in the comments what you think.
Hmm?
What's the matter, Ren?
Never mind.
Fine. What will you do?
Oh, I've got a little something in mind.
Mr. Shirling, what are you doing here?
I asked them to come.
When we talk about that ending there, so they've been basically introduced Niao Sun, who has we've known about her for a long time. Artwork of her has gone back all the way to the original games. They knew this was a leader of the Chi-Yu Men type of thing. So and of course she's trying to usurp power and use Lan Di and all that. So we know more about that now, which is cool. And then of course there's the fight with Lan Di himself. Now I know a lot of people who don't follow Shenmue as closely. They're fans, not necessarily anywhere near as hardcore, because not everybody should be. Just kind of assumed Shenmue 3 was supposed to be the end of the series. It would wrap it up, you'd fight Lan Di, and you'd win. It's not going to be that simplistic, and the game proved that. Shenmue 3 was never meant to be the end. As I said, it was originally this giant arc. And to anyone who says, hey, they had the opportunity to make a game, they should have just concluded it, that's an extremely arrogant statement. I mean, it's messed up to tell an artist, such as Yu Suzuki, hey, I like your work, I like exactly what you did, the way you did it originally, but for my purposes, for my selfish intent, I would really like you to compress all of it and tell it exactly the way I want to see it. That's the height of arrogance, man. To tell them that they have to compromise everything they want to do on expressing it to make it exactly the way you want, which would never have lived up to expectation because it couldn't possibly. It might as well have just been an animated movie at that point. So that's, yeah. I always wanted Yu Suzuki to make the game the way he felt it needed to be, and he did exactly that. He got a game that was within budget tolerances to advance the story and hopefully continue things going forward. And I'm very happy ultimately with what we got. Is it perfect? No, but I do like it a lot. So let's talk about some other aspects of it. I want to approach this as Shenmue as a whole, because I've said this before, I kind of consider it all basically one big game, and kind of in the way that one can look at Star Wars as one big movie or something like that. And I talked a little bit about it, how you would do save progression and all that stuff. Unfortunately, that element of it had to go. But when you look at it, let's pretend for a second that all of Shenmue is one game. Okay, all of it. Shenmue is a unique, I hesitate to call it an RPG because in of itself it referred to itself as a free, F-R-E-E, free roam eyes entertainment, free reactive eyes entertainment. I totally forgot. It was supposed to be this other subgenre that never took off. But basically we now call it open world. But the idea was, if you thought of it as an RPG, Shenmue 1 is the prologue of an RPG. It's the part of the game where it just sets up basically your motives, what the story is, who you are, where you're from, boom, go on your adventure. Shenmue 1 is a prologue for a game. It lets you play the entirety of a prologue, because if you actually break Shenmue 1 down, that's really all it is. It's, here's your motivation. This dude killed your father, and here's a little bit of a mystery, get going. And then it tells you, here's where you're from. You're from Yamanose in Japan. You're down the street from the harbor, and you go to Dobuita all the time. That's where all your friends are. You went to Suka High. It tells you your backstory. It tells you these characters are. That's kind of it. At the end of it, you're not really any better off. You didn't even says it at the end of the first game. He's like, after all that, I still didn't catch Lan Di. Because you didn't. You're in the prologue. Shenmue 2 is the one that really kind of takes you up to the next level, where your journey actually begins and you go off. You're in a foreign country dealing with all the drama of the prologue. And you expand upon that universe and expand on the characters and all that sort of stuff, and your adventure really takes off. Shenmue 3, if this is one big game, to be honest with you, it's the grinding phase of the game. It's where you're meant to, well, not only advance some of the story and introduce to new environments, but you're also meant to level up. I mean, that's actually a huge part of this game is your kung fu is insufficient. You have to work on that. You're not ready for any of these fights. And Lan Di himself, with dialogue, gives you the best clue of all of this. When you see him at the beginning of Shenmue 1, you don't have a chance in hell. You go for that one move and he just catches you like you're nothing, throws you to the side, almost kills you. There's no chance. But then in this game, he sends his lackeys after you, and you kick the crap out of his lackeys, and he actually says something to the effect of like,
"It seems you've improved a bit."
This would also apply to Chai too, by the way. I see a lot of people complaining about this, being like, dude, he was the big baddie of the first game, and in this game he's like a complete wuss bag. What happened? Nothing happened, at least not to Chai. He's exactly the same. What changed was you and your strength throughout your entire journey.
and that's kind of the whole point, is this game is supposed to be the game that's preparing him, the grinding phase for the player to make them sufficient for that real battle when it comes. But this is not when it comes. And it was never meant to be when it comes. That was a marketing move, I'm sure, to an extent, by showing Yolandi, be like, it's gonna happen, we're gonna fight. But any like super fan knows like this was never how it was supposed to go down. And they show that within the game, because as you're playing it and you try to fight him, you literally can't hit one move. You're not even supposed to be able to. It's totally impossible. But the point is they let you try, because if you thought about this as like a big game, say something like a Resident Evil, it's like the first time you encounter Nemesis. You're not supposed to be able to beat him. Like, that's impossible. That's the whole point, is to show you how much better this guy is than you. And as time goes on in the game, you find different weapons and little tactics that you can use to kind of slow him down. But that's it. That's all you're meant to be able to do throughout the course of the game. It's not until the end where there's some sort of big finale where you've, gotten through enough of the story and the skill set and all that to be able to take him on. That's what it is with Lan Di. Eventually, hopefully, if we get to Shenmue 5, which is, by the way, the new aim is to get to Shenmue 5. That's where it's supposed to conclude. So with that in mind, I love Shenmue 3. It's exactly what it needed to be, minus a couple of quirks. More or less, that's my review. Now, I have more to say on it because I could always talk about Shenmue, so I'm going to address a couple other points that are about Shenmue 3, but also kind of not about a review, just kind of people have been talking about it. First and foremost, at the time I make this video, all we've seen as far as the success of the game has been from the Japanese market and the British market specifically, where there's a whole bunch of articles saying like, oh, the game bombed, it's totally a flop, there will never be a Shenmue 4. I've read these articles, and I've literally sat there laughing at how incompetent they are at the writing of this. So one in particular made me really just LOL, like, for the lack of a better way of putting it. It was hilariously poorly written. Basically, the dude was making the case that Shenmue 3's target market was Japan. It only sold 18,000 copies in its first week, therefore the game flopped, therefore it's never going to see Shenmue 4. Now, it very well could be true that we'll never see Shenmue 4. I'm still betting very heavily that it will happen, by the way. But here's why that makes no sense. One, Shenmue 3's target market sure as hell was not Japan. That is, to anyone who knows this franchise, that statement can only be said with laughter. So here's the thing. Shenmue as a franchise, yes, originally, when Sega started it out, it was intended to be a game for the Japanese, by the Japanese, about the Japanese. But guess who didn't embrace it? The Japanese. Now, while it was never a massive success in the other parts of the world, the West embraced it. We loved it. Those of us who got into it were like, this is cool. That's a perfect quote for that, because Corey said it all the time, and as Rio. But where it saw the most success was in those markets, because not only did we see it as this interesting story with this crazy open world that was super immersive, it had that Japan simulator vibe. The second one had the same thing with like the China simulator vibe. You know who doesn't care about simulating daily monotonous life in Japan? The Japanese. They don't care. So, and I can tell you this about Shenmue 3 firsthand. I was literally there for a month leading up to the release of this game. When it came to Shenmue 1 and 2, Sega put a lot of effort into the re-release. This version you see right here, which is the best version of the re-release, debatably, this is the collector's edition. This came out a couple of months after the rest of the world got it. It's got some of the bug patches on disc as opposed to just being digital downloads. It comes with a cool bonus set of music CDs of scores from the first two games and an art book. It's great. But they stripped out the English language for no reason other than to point out to the Japanese, like, hey, this is a Japanese game for Japanese people. You should totally embrace it. Guess what they didn't do? Embrace it. And I was there when this came out as well. Sega put up a ton of marketing campaigns around this. There were stores with giant kiosks of Shenmue stuff for 1 and 2, all over the place. You couldn't go into a video game store and not see it. And when we went down to Yokosuka as well, Yokosuka went nuts. Because again, that's where the first game actually takes place. They took actual stores and they put giant standees of various characters that would be outside of those stores in the actual game. They gave away these cool guide magazines. They gave away these cool like coasters. The city of Yokosuka sent me a set of them because I did a video for them where I was part of an IGN Japan video. I was in a segment where I actually got to go out there once again to Yokosuka to film a segment to explain to Japanese fans why we in the West loved Shenmue so much. So they were cool enough to send me a set for that. But I had to explain it the same way, which was, we loved it because we aren't from there. So there's very few actual Japanese Shenmue fans. So when it came to Shenmue 3, to Deep Silver's credit, they knew not to waste their time. I hate to say that, but it's true. It came out there because it had to, because it is fundamentally a Japanese game. But I'll tell you this right now. I went to a lot of places in Japan on this trip. A lot. I went to various areas of Tokyo, to Chiba, to Yokohama, Yokosuka itself. I went to Osaka. I went to Kyoto. I went to various spots in between there in the Kansai area. Actively looking for Shenmue 3 related promotional materials. You know how many I found? It was like 2 ever. Most stores weren't even carrying it. There was a handful that were, at best. I went, and this isn't even obscure locations. I went to places like Denden Town in Osaka, which is like a nerd mecca. It has like a giant Gundam robot outside, all this sort of stuff. Dedicated game stores, right? And a couple of those had small little sections, just small little sections that said Shenmue 3, had a pre-order case, and a little pre-order slip and stuff like that. That was it. I went to, the day it came out, my buddy and I, Switch, aka Phantom Riverstone, who you should also totally follow on Twitter. He's a great guy. Lives out in Japan. If you ever need a guide or something like that, that is a dude to talk to, especially for Shenmue fans. But we went around to various stores. The dude speaks fluent Japanese. We were going into various stores asking, like, do you have any copies? The day it came out. And the ones that he would always ask them, and they would basically say, like, we have like 3 copies. And it was like, oh, did you sell the others? He's like, no, we haven't sold any. They only carried 3 copies in most stores without marketing whatsoever. You know how many Japanese Shenmue 3 ads I saw anywhere in Japan? 0. Not a single one on any of those train systems. Not a single one on any sort of banner anywhere. No posters. Nothing. We went to Akihabara. You know, video game nerd mecca. We went there the day this game came out. This exact copy, you know what I mean? Japanese, Shenmue 3, which again you can win. Check the Twitter in the description. We went there thinking there's got to be something here, man. There's got to be... No. There was no marketing, no promotion, no effort behind making the Japanese understand that Shenmue 3 was out. Again, not even in Yokosuka, where it takes place, or at least part 1 took place. So when I hear it only was the top-selling game for PS4 that week, and it only sold 18,000 copies, I'm stunned by how good that actually is. I would have expected less than 5,000. I just can't even believe that it did that well. And the other thing I find hilarious is a lot of these articles talk about how, oh, well, this is comeuppance for the Epic deal. So they couldn't get Steam sales in Japan, so it really hurt them. Yeah, whoever wrote that knows nothing about the Japanese market. Steam is basically non-existent there because PC gaming is basically non-existent there. Not that you can't have it. It certainly works. And certainly a lot of people could have access to it and do because it's not prevented. But you know what it isn't? It's popular. There's not a lot of people that play on PC in Japan. They just don't. It's not their thing. It's not a Japanese concept, so they don't really embrace it. So most of those sales are physical PS4 copies. And that's supposed to be a flop? Whoever wrote that is an idiot. Like, that doesn't make any sense. That is just blatantly not true. Those numbers are actually remarkable considering all of those factors. So, now, if you were to compare that to, say, the American numbers, if it came out and sold 18,000 in the US, then yeah, I would completely agree that that was a flop. But for Japan, that's remarkable. Now we go on to the UK. This is the one that actually was kind of depressing. So the UK, it landed at like number 14 that week. It was not a good release. It didn't do very well, which is heavily disappointing. The only kind of excuse I can give to that is It is my understanding, and British people? I know that Britons is technically correct, but whenever I refer to that, I'm always told that that's wrong, even though that's not what the internet itself actually says. But whatever. British people, if you don't mind, it is my understanding that you are the only country in Europe where the Xbox One is actually more popular than the PlayStation 4. Now, if that's wrong, then I withdraw the statement completely. But that's what I've heard. If that's the case, then it kind of would make some sense why it didn't do as well there. At the time I record this video, again, we don't know the numbers for the rest of the world. And I will agree completely. If we get the American numbers and they suck, then yeah, it's probably over. Or at least it's going to be Shenmue 4 with even less of a budget. We don't know. We don't know yet. But to be honest, I'm really not that worried. I was at like 95%. I'm more at 85%, but that's just because I'm trying to hold back possible disappointment. But what I will say is I do know, like I said, firsthand, we all know it. Yu Suzuki wants to do Shenmue 4. We all believe that. We know that. That's a fact. It just comes down to funding. So all you can really do in the end is if you want a Shenmue 4 is you got to support Shenmue 3. It's just that simple. And I am very confident that it will still happen. So I think I've kind of said my piece on all of this. I'm sure I could sit here and just talk about Shenmue all day. Obviously, I'm super passionate about it. Obviously, I care about it. And I'm going to continue to support it in any way I can, including other giveaways and things like that. And I'll be talking about that soon. Like I gave away the sets of these and all that. There will be other giveaways coming up soon, I promise you. Just stay tuned to either the channel or things like Shenmue 500K or my Twitter or whatever. So follow me on the social media stuff. But again, immediate, like on the upfront here, you can win this Japanese copy of Shenmue 3 straight from Yokosuka. This is courtesy of Go Collect. And like I said, the description is there. There's a tweet. You follow me, you follow Go Collect on Twitter, and retweet that tweet, and you're entered to win a Japanese copy. They'll be selecting the winner. That won't be me. But you have to do those things and you're entered to win this. And like I said, even though it sold that many copies, which again I stress is a good thing, it was hard to find. Like we were actively looking for a place to buy copies and a lot of places just said they weren't going to bother carrying it. And it still sold 18,000 copies in a week. People also like to point out, hey man, the re-release, was an older game and it sold more. It sold like 21,000 copies. So yeah, this game also had advertising. This had nothing, and it only sold 3,000 less? Dude, that's amazing! But whatever. People who've never been there somehow know more than the rest of us. Anyway, so yeah, that little axe to grind kind of to the side. I'd like to thank you very much for watching, everybody. Again, if you could please like, comment, subscribe, check out all the social media stuff in the description. I super appreciate it. Hope this was a decent first game review, and probably the only one I'll do, because I don't really do game reviews. But thank you very much, and I'll see you all later.